Boom. There you
Oh,
go.
wait. Oh, wait. I just have to go eat lunch first. I forgot to
Just
eat
look at it.
lunch.
Look at it. It's the same. Good morning, people.
Good morning. Welcome back. Welcome to Table for 7 Billion.
Yes.
We're here. We're back today. Olive's in his Oakland kitchen. I'm in my Berkeley office, and we try to keep this far apart from each other at all times.
Except when we're in a cough. When we're in a cough, we get very close to each other.
Yeah, it's a legal issue. So bear with us. So we have all kinds of things to talk about today. I wanted to talk first about one of my early
You want to
childhood
talk first?
influences.
You know what, James? You go ahead. You go right ahead. So, ladies and
I have to
gentlemen,
talk. I have to
James
talk
has to
because
speak. He has
yeah,
to speak first.
the voices in my head. It's the only way I can drown them out is if I talk over them. So
You know, the voice in my head when I'm on the show, I listen to your voices. Usually it's mine, right?
yeah. Is it just
Anyway.
mine, or are there more than mine?
There's more weird stuff going on in there.
So, I learned to
Yes.
cook in various ways, mostly from watching people, just experimenting, things like that. But one of my
Watching people
earliest
cooking for you.
what?
You mean
Yeah.
watching people cooking for you, right?
Well, I knew a lot of chefs in New York, and
Please
I would
go.
watch them do stuff. But one of
Actually,
my
James,
earliest,
I'm sorry to cut you off. Completely sorry. You have a great. Just can you explain where you're from, Dick? Because this is something we've not talked about. Like you work in Dean and Deluca, so you have. I like this background, and I think people should hear that again. You have a very specific background
yeah.
where we can talk about all this. So can you start with that? Then people understand why you know so little.
Well, I was born and raised in the Midwest. I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but I mostly grew up in Nebraska. Few stops in
Oh,
between.
okay.
And
Wow.
then when I was in my early 20s, I think, 25 maybe, I moved to New York City. I moved there to seek fame and fortune on the stage, but
Oh, okay.
instead I happened into a food career. I went to work for this store as a manager that wasn't a food store, but it was a very cutting edge houseware store, and they sold every kind of houseware, furniture, lighting, stationery, but a lot of cookware and tabletop. And it's where I first started to learn really about food. And of course I was living in Soho, so the food scene there was crazy in those days. This was in the early 80s, and I learned a lot. And then I went to work for Dean and DeLuca, which arguably the most influential
Right.
food store of the past 30, 40 years.
Does it
And I
still
was
exist, Chef?
no,
Uh,
no,
oh,
it's now
wow.
completely gone.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
yeah, some people got a hold of it that didn't understand it at all. They tried to make it into this sort of Gucci of food stores, and that's not what we ever saw it as. We saw it as a market in the European tradition. We sold
So
lots of good food.
what would be a similar store like not sur la table, right? I mean,
Well, Sur
not
La
really.
Table is similar in terms of cookware because we did sell cookware and tabletop at Dean and DeLuca too. But I would say in terms of food, um, probably some Draeger's, and
Draggers, which
even
Draggers
Berkeley.
is still open, and
Oh yeah,
I just heard they're reopening the cooking school.
yeah,
There's not many
and
cooking schools right around anymore.
right,
Most of them
right.
are
They
gone.
most
That's
of them
terrible.
fell by the wayside, and to a certain degree, Berkeley Bowl
Mm,
is
which we're gonna talk
probably.
about today.
Yeah, and then there's a store, a very famous store in Ann Arbor, Michigan called Zingerman's Delicatessen, which people may or may not have heard of, but it's actually a pretty important store.
Oh wow.
Um, and that's close to what Dean and DeLuca was. But there aren't too many places like Dean and DeLuca left because there are a lot of big stores that have kind of taken over that market, and even supermarkets got into the swing of it. You know, Andronico's in the old days was kind of a specialty store
That's
almost.
right. That's true. It was pricey, but good
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Market Hall here in Berkeley and in Rockridge in
Yes.
Oakland, that's
Yeah.
very much in the same
Beautiful
vein.
stuff.
Um, anyway, I spent 10 years with them. And as a buyer, I traveled all
Wow.
over Europe and the United
Oh my God,
States,
that's crazy.
going to markets and stores and trade shows. And then when my time there came to an end and I moved out here to Berkeley, I had been freelancing as a writer. I started doing freelance articles for a trade magazine called The Gourmet Retailer. And when I moved out here, they asked me to join as a full-time editor.
Which is
So
a
I
big
did.
publication, right? It's a
Yeah, it's a
pretty
national publication. It's a trade, so it was written for retailers of specialty food and
right.
housewares.
So what does that mean?
And
Trade? You give a magazine. You buy. You give $1 and they give you a magazine. That's trade.
right. No, actually, subscription was free if you were a retailer. If you were anybody
Oh,
else, you had to pay for it. But it was a big glossy magazine, and I was the food editor for many years. And then I joined, and then that one got sold, and I joined another magazine, Gourmet Business, and I did that for a number of years. So for, I don't know, 25, 30 years, I wrote about food for these magazines and also traveled even more. I traveled all
right.
the time. I
And
was going to Europe.
that's what's important, right? Because you went to you
Yeah,
went to the sources of those places. You actually
right,
have like visual of. I mean, you actually saw the olive
right.
oil, the bacon, the parmesan, the cheese, all this stuff.
Exactly.
When we talk about it on the show, James has been there.
Yeah, not only did I travel a lot
Nice job, man.
to trade shows, but I used to get invited on press trips all the time. So, you
Right.
know, some government would invite me to come to,
Wow.
you know, Israel or
Crazy.
Switzerland or Spain or whoever, and they would tour me around to show me. Sometimes it was specific. I did a bunch of trips to Spain that were all about cheese, but then other trips like Switzerland and Israel, those and they were more general. They wanted me to see all the food they produced and wine. I went to Tunisia specifically to look at olive groves and
Yeah,
olive
yeah.
oil manufacturing.
Tunisia.
So it was very,
I
I
have
mean,
family there. I
it was
used
an
to go there a lot.
amazing experience, all that, you know, it was an opportunity to do things that I never would have done just on my own. So it was pretty great. Um,
Yeah, I've been to Tunisia a lot. I have some family there. We used to go
it's a
regularly.
beautiful,
We used to
beautiful
we
country.
drove we even drove there with my little Fiat with my dad and my mom. Little Fiat,
Uh-huh.
the 500, the
Yeah.
three of us crossing the Gibraltar, go all the way down to Tatooine in the
That must have
south,
been
south, south. Okay.
difficult driving through the Mediterranean. I'm sure I'm surprised the car didn't stall when you hit
You
the
have to
water.
drive really fast before you get to the ocean, and you keep going, man. And it's like you're hoping for the best, but you know what? Stay on the rocks.
Well, you know, if you get to Gibraltar, it's not that far. You could probably
No,
go up a ramp and just jump.
it's really cool. Like at night,
Yeah.
before you take the ferry, there's a ferry.
Uh-huh.
You see the lights. I mean, it's really beautiful. Oh my God.
I've stood in southern Spain in the little town of Ronda, which is up in the mountains in southern Spain. You can, on a clear day, you can see North Africa,
Oh,
which
it's
was
so
very
pretty,
cool.
so beautiful.
It makes you realize how small the Mediterranean
Ye-
is, and yet
Right? Yeah,
in some ways it's so big
crazy.
because of the history. It's just enormous history from that area, but it's really a very small body
Well,
of
it's
water.
super old. Those are, and one of the best incredible history from Tunisia is Tunis, which was Carthage.
Right, right.
In a Fiat,
And
yeah,
you know,
Tatooine. Tatooine, you know what that is? That's like the frontier of. It's the end at the end. And
yeah,
we went there. So it was me, my brother, my sister. We were all young. And I was maybe 8, and so we were all kids. And my dad is a doctor. So what I'm saying that is because he was not really worried, about all this stuff because he would make literally he would make medicine on the trip. So he had all this stuff. He's a chemist also. So he had his bicarbonate, the baking
uh-huh,
soda. He has lemon. He has a bunch of stuff like that. So he could make, you know, because the food was different, right? So we had to kind of adapt. and he would
Right.
make us the Alka-Seltzer, in the plastic bag. And we drove down, it was crazy stuff. We were all small in that tiny car, and we would stop in Oasis. It was nobody, no one. We were really cruising by ourselves, and he would pick up water and put some pills in there, and so we could drink it.
Wow.
So he had all this system, like 3 kids. This is why we're a little crazy in our family, but we traveled a lot, right? I
Yeah.
traveled all over the place also because we had these parents. They were just on the road, and they were
That's
both
great.
working. That's crazy, I know.
That is really marvelous. It's a marvelous thing to be able to go and experience another culture that's so different than your own. I mean,
With your kids,
yeah,
you want to have
we didn't
other
we didn't
perspectives. Anyway,
my family, we didn't travel internationally when I was young, but we traveled to other cities. We went as a family. We came out to California. We went to Los
right.
Angeles and San Francisco. So and then we lived outside of Chicago for a few years. So we used to spend a lot of time downtown Chicago. And so I grew up with this appreciation for cities, and it made me not afraid of cities. I love going to cities. So
Yeah.
I moved to New York. I had never even been there, and I moved there,
Wow.
and
That's
but
crazy because New York
but
is
it's
a.
because I was used to big cities like
Oh yeah.
L.A. and Chicago and Minneapolis, and so
Yeah,
it was
no,
good.
it's like for us, it was interesting to have no knowledge of anything, and we just went for it. My parents are really courageous. I mean,
That's really great.
well, they were thinking nothing's gonna happen. It's like if we don't do it, we don't. You can't think of the bad. You have to think of the good,
Right,
because bad happens regardless if you think of it or not. But the good will not happen if you don't think of it. That's for sure. I mean,
right,
you need to be excited to go and go crazy. And by being a little bit, excited and very positive, things don't happen much. I mean, I've traveled all over the place. I've really rarely had issues. Sometimes, which I took care of it, but really rarely. You're
yeah,
just going for it. You're not like scared, going in the
right.
street like that. No, people can feel that. They feel that you're happy to be here.
Well, even in New York, I mean, I remember when I lived there, I never had any trouble, and but used to, people would say, well, the people that would
Right.
would would get hassled were the people that had a map and they walked around like
Right.
this
Oh, I
and they
know.
just
I told
had
my
no
boys.
idea where they were. I mean, they stood out like a sore thumb, and
I,
I always
I told my
just
yeah.
I knew where I was going and I just went
That's
about my business. And
so that's a very good tip, right? You don't look up when you travel. I know you want to see all the buildings and stuff, but that's something that
yeah,
you get spot when you get robbed. And this is something people, most people know. I mean, most people know. Some people know, but not all of it. You get robbed by a team. It's
yeah,
not one guy who just decide to rob you. It's a team. So you have they're gonna mark you, they're gonna watch you. There's a team. So if you start walking around with your map like this,
if you
you're
look
spotted.
helpless, if you look
You're spotted.
helpless,
You're spotted. There's
and
a team
also
already in place, and they're following you.
if you look like a tourist, they assume you've probably got money because
On
you
you,
don't live
on
there.
you, cash.
Yeah. Yeah, and probably like things you've purchased and whatever. And like I never walked around New York with lots of money on me. I mean, I didn't need to. But
I didn't need to because I didn't have any, so that was easy
yeah,
for me.
yeah, that helps. Poverty helps.
But
And also thieves are going to target somebody that looks that they're going to pick the low-hanging fruit. So
right,
I was a good sized guy and I always looked like I knew where I was going. So
when you look, when
why
you're
would they
going
attack
somewhere,
me? Yeah. No, I
if there's a
rarely
need,
knew where I was going, but I always looked like I knew where I was going.
especially me when I was looking like I knew where I was going, they could see me passing by every time. Like, oh look, it's him again.
He
But
knows where he's
let's
going,
not
but he's going in a
let's not
circle.
bother. Let's not bother this guy, right? You're going
But
with conviction.
it's very cool for you because living in Paris, you guys could get in a car and you could drive and cross 2 or 3 countries if you wanted to.
Oh
Whereas
yeah,
where I lived, we would go the same distance, but we'd still be in the same country, because
yeah.
big. If I ever go to Montmartre with a special lady friend and a group of 15 guys is trying to show you magic tricks while they Wait to isolate her, grab her, and get out of there. Now that's good advice. If that ever happens to me, I'll remember.
So you grab
Um,
the friends and you go, or you grab your girlfriend?
if I'm ever in Montmartre with a special lady friend, I'm going to be more in trouble with my wife than the 15 guys. So I don't think I'll have to worry about it.
That's true, man. Montmartre is actually where I'm born. I was born in Montmartre.
Oh, really?
Hôpital Bichat, 1961. I used to live Rue Le Pic with my parents. It was very, very small. Both my parents were students. So my dad was a student doctor and my mom also.
Right.
And we were living in that small apartment. I was at the hospital always in the rooms. So I lived literally in the hospitals because there was no, you can't have the kids. There was no keeping the kids, right? So I was in a
Right.
room or in a room. I was pretty quiet and I was staying with my parents all the time.
My first time to Paris, I stayed in Montmartre. I stayed in a little
Yeah.
hotel in Montmartre on a little square, and apparently on the other side of the square was a studio which had been Picasso's, one of his early studios, which is neither here nor there. But that's my first experience of Paris was Montmartre.
Oh yeah,
Still one of
wow.
my still a favorite
So
area.
pretty, so pretty.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of pickpocket. Because it's super
Oh
touristy,
yeah.
and you can see those people. If you don't know, of course, you don't see anything, but you can see it around, and there's a system, and you can
Yeah.
see that. You can see the system. You can see it pretty quickly if you pay attention. If you keep looking at the church, like there's
And
so
you're
many.
right. And I think that was Kenny's comment. He's right
Yeah,
too. What they try to do is one person
yeah,
is distracting you somehow, while the other one comes around and picks your pocket, or apparently
yeah.
in Kenny's case, takes your special lady friend. I just want to know, Kenny, was that a hooker or was it that
You
kind of
did-
special lady friend, or was it?
James, one of my hoping is you didn't pay up front. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah,
Or did you get
yeah.
your money back?
Well, we
We're
got off
making fun.
topic here.
We're making fun of you, man. But we mean it.
But listen, don't worry. We're
We
not
paid,
laughing
yeah.
with you. We're laughing at you.
He paid in a different way. Yeah, that we know.
Yeah. Nothing a shot of penicillin wouldn't take care of.
But when we went to Tunisia, so when I went to Tunisia, my sister was very small. She must have been 6 years old or 7. And she had blonde hair, like white blonde hair. It was very, very weird. And they've never seen that in Tunisia, ever.
Oh yeah.
So when we come to a village, all the kids were running because they'd never seen the car. I mean, the car was tiny. The luggage on the trunk, on the
On the
on the
roof.
thing, like in the Italian movies
Yeah.
of Fellini's. It's exactly the same movie. 5 of us in the little Fiat driving to the desert. And then
Like
we arrived
Monsieur
in the
Hulot.
villages. Monsieur Hulot. Oh my God, that's so funny. And then
Les
we arrived there and
vacances.
they would touch her hair. They would follow the car and touch her hair. And we were always invited anywhere we go. We could never pay for anything. You have to understand the Arabs and the Muslims have one thing that they have one of the most, they're very hospitable. This
Yeah.
is their religion. This is not
Yep.
just like, it's their religion. So they
Yeah.
fight. They fight to feed you and to host you. So
Yeah.
they fight, like they really fight. And whoever is going to have you to sleep at this house, then the second of the village, the second in chief, is going to be the one who invites us for dinner. This is a
Yeah.
huge honor for them. It's like, and it's incredible. Every village we went, we've never been to a hotel except in Tataouine, where those villages are in the cliff. I don't know if you've seen that.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
a home in cliff in the mountain.
Right.
You've seen those, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
troglodytes, and that has
I
to do. And actually, have you seen that there's many stuff like that in the world, right? In Turkey also, there's a bunch of cities underground. Have you not?
Huh.
They all they've excavated a bunch of stuff that are in the ground. They don't know what and where and how, but they are assuming something happens before 100,000 years ago or before 200,000 years ago, and it is all this weird stuff that they find in the ground, so whatever, right?
Yeah. Well, it's true in
Anyway,
the
sorry.
Southwest United States too. The
Yes,
Hopis, they lived in those things
Mexico,
up in the, and it was
in
safer
South
because
America.
you could see your enemies coming from a long way away.
Uh,
Probably didn't have to worry about wild animals too much up there.
I don't know.
How the hell
I
they got
forgot.
up there, no one knows. But very cool places.
Anyway,
Yeah, I
we're not.
love traveling in Arab countries for that reason. They are so hospitable
Oh my God, that like you guys.
and
I
they're
don't know
so
if
friendly,
you.
and they want to show you the best of their town or their country or
So
whatever. And
it's very true. We're not exaggerating. It's like I don't know about now, because now people are becoming more and more Westerners and stuff like that. Cappadocia, yeah, Cappadocia. This is an incredible and weird city where you can find those tunnels that can host that you can live with 20,000 people in those tunnels. It's a huge
wow.
city. It's incredible. Like so, they have no idea how did that happen and what were they doing in there, whatever.
Yeah,
But anyway, so yes,
I think it's still true in Arab countries if you get outside the big cities. You get to
I
small
haven't been for a
villages. I
long
think
time.
people are still very traditional. I mean, the
I
last
think
time when I was in Tunisia a few years ago, it was like that. And Tunisia is so
Tunisia is
beautiful.
very
The upper
welcoming.
half of the country looks basically like Southern California, and then of course the bottom half is the Sahara Desert. So
Yeah.
it's also very beautiful, but
So that was
dangerous.
The
They
Phoenicians.
won't even let tourists go. There's a certain line about halfway down the country. They won't let tourists go below that line after like May because it's too dangerous. Because they
Oh
know they're
yeah.
just going to have to come and rescue you because you're
You
gonna.
know what's the hardest thing in the desert? The hardest thing is to find the exit.
Yeah,
That's like
yeah,
you,
yeah,
anyway. So when we were traveling, so the we were traveling and we could not pay for anything. You can't even buy anything. They would not let you. So we
yeah,
traveled all the way, sleeping with people, and we're not. This is not a rich people. It's like we live
right,
with everybody, right? It's like we sleep on the corner with the family. It's all together, and we
yeah,
eat all together. There's no
yeah.
fork, no knife. We all eat together. So in the villages, people all eat together. So you have this big rondo, and you eat with your hand. So we didn't know about the left hand and right hand while we go in there. But super patient.
The food is so good.
Oh my god.
It's very fresh.
So
Um,
that was fun. You know, I took my boys. Yeah, we traveled a lot too with my boys. Traveling is a very important experiment because you need to have other ideas and perspective, and to be in one country forever and not move, it's not good for the brain. You
yeah.
become very intolerant, and it's weird. And yeah. All right, let's move on. So good.
Well, what were we
So
talking about? Cooking, learning how to cook. My earliest experience with
wow.
learning how to cook was we had a book in our house called
Oh yeah,
the
that's
Betty Crocker for Kids
that's
Cookbook.
so funny.
And so anyway, I was thinking about that today, and it got me thinking about Betty Crocker, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about her. I don't know if she's as well known today as she was, but there's still a lot of Betty
I mean,
Crocker
you
products
can
out there.
you can see books in like those thrift stores and stuff.
Yeah,
Every
the
you can
Betty
always
Crocker
find a
cookbook is still around.
wow. That's crazy.
Um, and she was hugely influential. At one point, she was considered, what was it? I don't know when this was, but one time Fortune magazine described her as the second most popular woman in America after
Oh my
Eleanor
god.
Roosevelt.
And
And Betty
is
Crocker
that
doesn't actually exist.
it's crazy.
She's a totally made up figure. She was made up by this
Wow.
company in 1921 as sort of the face of the company. It was the Washburn Crosby Company, which of course no one's ever heard of, but they later merged with other milling companies and became General Mills, which is now, of course, is a huge company. But Betty Crocker became this face, and she was so influential, so famous, so loved and yet she doesn't actually exist. It was very crazy. Her image has been updated over the years to keep her sort of contemporary and also to keep her the same age. She hasn't aged at all. Um, Very funny. But there was a whole thing with General Mills. They had the Betty Crocker seal of approval. So companies would vie to earn this seal of approval from Betty Crocker, and it was as though Betty Crocker was in her lab testing these products and deciding what would get her seal, even though again she wasn't real. Um, in fact, you never looked better. What? Oh, yeah. Now I can see you. Yeah. Oh, really? I see you. I don't know if our readers can. So I interviewed for a job once at General Mills up in Minneapolis. They were looking for a new buyer for their catalog, and I went and interviewed with them once. I didn't get the job, and I'm not sure I would have wanted it anyway. But I was sort of floored to find out that their headquarters is on Betty Crocker Drive. You got to have some clout when they start renaming streets. So anyway, but it was a great book. It was, I mean, she did. My mom had the big Betty Crocker book, which was like a three-ring binder, so they would always be issuing supplements, so you could always add to it and subtract. You could get rid of stuff you didn't want. You could add new recipes. But we also had this one for kids, and I learned some basic cooking out of there. I learned some baking. I used to bake out of it a lot and make dishes, and it was really cool. Every kid should have a book like that. I mean, not necessarily Betty Crocker, but they do make. Oh, they don't hear you either. Oh, that's too bad. Do they hear me? Can people hear me? Well, that's the important thing. All right, so I'm doing my own show now. This is great. Um, Olive just wasn't working out, so we had to let him go, and I've taken over the show now, so I'll just keep talking. Um, so, another thing I thought of today in my wanderings about the house is I have a whole bunch of really, really cool vinegars. And most of them are from my friend Steve, who's been on the show. It's from Olive Oil Jones, and olive oil is really his thing. But they also do some marvelous vinegars, and I've got four of them here today. And I know this sounds strange to do a tasting on a podcast when you can't actually taste anything, but I'm going to talk about them because what I want to convey is how important it is to have a variety of vinegars. I think I personally love vinegar. I think it's very useful in the kitchen, and I think you can have different vinegars for different things. They're very, very different. For example, this one, oh, are you back? No, I can see you, but no one else can. I can see you, but no one else can. That's true a lot. I see people that other people can't see. I see dead people. So this one is a vinegar made from Riesling. Now, basically, most of these vinegars, in fact, most vinegars are made from wine. That's what the name means. It means sour wine. It's from the Latin. Uh, and they can be made from other things. They can be made from malt. They can be made from um, rice. They can anything that you can ferment and make into a fermented beverage can be made into some version of vinegar. But classically, vinegar is made from wine. This one is made from a Riesling, which is a little unusual. Typically, in commercial vinegar making, they use, they don't buy fine wine. They buy sort of bulk wine that they can convert into vinegar, and that can make some very fine vinegar. This is from a Riesling, which is typically a sweet wine. Um, Not always, but Riesling tends to be a sweeter wine. And even the dry Riesling can have this sort of, I don't know, a hint of sweetness to it. I don't like to drink them all the time, but they're really good. A lot of people recommend Riesling with like spicy foods, like Thai food or spicy Chinese food, because it kind of cuts through that a little bit. Are you back? I don't think so. Anyway, this is a Riesling vinegar. It's a little sweet, not real sweet, but it's a little sweet. It's wonderful for all kinds of things. It's wonderful in a sauce. I use a little bit of it in salad dressing. Yeah, you're right, Kenny. Chinese vinegars are great. Chinese do a black vinegar, which is really interesting. I think it's rice based, but also I think they use some kind of malt. I don't know. It's really interesting. Not something you'd necessarily put on a salad, but and now the other thing about vinegar that I think is a general rule is that you should be able to sip vinegar without going into convulsions. It should be good enough to drink. I mean, you don't want to sit and drink it like wine, but like you saw, I just took a sip of this, and the vinegar I grew up with was just distilled white vinegar from Heinz. You take a sip of that stuff, and oh my God, it's just the most horrible thing in the world. But good vinegar, you should be able to sip. Oh yeah, yeah. Now, here's another one that everyone's going to be familiar with, although this is really the good stuff. This is a balsamic vinegar, and unfortunately, a lot of people that are used to using balsamic vinegar are used to using really cheap balsamic vinegar that's not really made in the traditional way. Um, Allow 4 to 5 fruit flies into your liquid as they can carry the local use as inoculation, get it started. Yeah, probably. You can actually buy the mother to start vinegar, and you can then divide it. What you no, it's like the mother is what they call the. It's sort of the physical manifestation of the yeast that does all the work in converting the vinegar. And what you do is you get a little bit of it and you put it in a jar or a bucket of wine and let that turn, and then you can divide it and then create more, and you can just keep dividing it and do more and more and keep adding wine to it and grow the mother. And the mother will keep for a long time. It'll form like a it looks almost like a jellyfish in the vinegar. Um, anyway, most people are used to cheap, inexpensive balsamic vinegar, which is, it's not bad if you just want it for a salad dressing. This is really good stuff. This is made in the traditional way, except that it's not put into the little barrels. The way you make balsamic vinegar is you take grape must and you must is like the it's everything. It's the juice, it's the skins, it's everything, and you put it in a barrel, you add either some old balsamic vinegar or you add some kind of yeast to it, and you let it start fermenting. And then you put it and you what but you I should back up. You take the wine and you cook it slowly. You cook it so it cooks down by about half, so it gets very concentrated. Then you add the starter, and then you put it in a wood barrel and you age it for a few years. And typically it's aged for anywhere from 4 to 7 years. And then to make the really great stuff, they put it into these small barrels. It's a set of barrels. One's about this size, and then they go down in size all the way down. And the little barrel is the only one that they actually bottle from. So the wine goes in when the little barrel, when you take some out, you add from the next size, you fill that from the next size, you fill that from the next size, and then the big barrel you add fresh wine to. So, or I mean, fresh vinegar that's been aged for several years, so it's already good vinegar. So this is at the point where you would put it into the little barrels. It's you can see. I don't know. I don't know how well you can see it on my. Yeah. On my crappy camera, I don't know if this shows up, but you can see it's very thick. It's viscous. When you swirl it around, the glass, it sort of hangs on the glass for a minute. Whereas like this one, this is a regular wine vinegar, and you can see it looks like wine. This is very thick because it's really been reduced. It's a very concentrated vinegar. And also balsamic vinegar never really becomes wine. It goes from being this concentrated grape juice basically gets converted over into vinegar. So there's never really a time when it's wine. Anyway, balsamic vinegar is very sweet. Some are more sweet than others. The cheap ones. Mhm. Right. Now this is sweet, but it's sort of like pruny or raisiny. So it's not just cloyingly sweet. The cheap ones, what they do is they take red wine vinegar, sorry, and they just add caramel coloring to it and lots of sugar. And so they make them. So some of those ones that are like, $4 for a bottle like this, uh, it's super sweet. It's not real balsamic vinegar. If you like it, fine. But for just a few dollars more, you can get something much better quality that's going to have better flavor, not be so candy sweet. This is this is not like drinking. I mean, you can drink this stuff. It's absolutely delicious. It's great, all kinds of things, but it's almost like drinking a port or something. And then the really great balsamic, the stuff that's like $100 for a little bottle this big, that stuff you can drink it. It's just fabulous. You wouldn't want to drink it like that because it's too expensive. You use it by the drop. But anyway, I like to put a little balsamic in my salad dressing, but then I add other vinegars to it to kind of cut the sweetness a little bit to give extra flavor. So the next, yeah, 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 yeah. Now this next one I have here is very unusual. It's an Italian vermouth vinegar. So this is made from Italian vermouth, and it's it's got a real kind of savory aroma. It's almost like what they talk about umami in foods. It's this really, and it's got a little sourness at the end. It's very much like drinking vermouth, except it's a little more sour. Obviously, it's got more acid to it, more tang to it. Great on salads, really good stuff. Also great for all kinds of dishes. We put vinegar in all kinds of things. And then this last one is Lambrusco red wine vinegar, and it's basic vinegar, but it's made from Lambrusco, which is one of the principal grapes that's used in northern Italy. Right. A lot of people know Lambrusco as a lightly sparkling red wine, which is great. The Italians up there, they drink it with they get like a plate of salami, and then they drink Lambrusco with it. It's really, really good together. But it makes a fabulous vinegar. It's oh right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this one is so delicious. It's got a faint sweetness to it, but it's mostly like you really taste the grape, you taste the wine, and of course it's got the acid, the vinegar acid. But it's really, really good. And my point in all of this is to show you that now obviously you can't take you're not tasting these as I am, but the point is to collect vinegars. Uh, is talking to himself again? I'm always talking to myself. I'm my favorite conversationalist. Um, it's great. I sometimes have as many as 7 and 8 vinegars. Some of my other favorites, I really love aged sherry wine vinegar from Spain is really, really good. Um, champagne vinegar is good. I think we actually have some of that upstairs. That's good when you want a white wine vinegar is good, but I tend to prefer it made from champagne because it just gives it that extra flavor. It's really, really nice. Um, and I mix and match these all the time. I like to use sometimes as many as 3 and 4 vinegars in a salad dressing. I think it gives a lot of depth of flavor, and uh, so I don't think anyone can see Olivier, but I just want you to know that he's agreeing with everything I said. Um, he thinks I'm brilliant. Of course, he's right. So, where do you find vinegar? Where do you go to get good vinegar? It's hard, but it's also easy. I mean, if you just if you only shop at Safeway, you're going to have trouble. And I don't mean to pick on Safeway, but they buy a certain way, and they have probably a selection of vinegars, but they're not going to be super artisanally made. They're not going to be super high quality. They're going to have probably a inexpensive balsamic vinegar, maybe a mid-level balsamic vinegar. They'll have some decent red wine vinegar and white wine vinegar, um, and that's about it. So I recommend, just like in buying olive oil, that you go to a more specialty store, somebody that's going to have a selection of vinegars that's going to be a little more interesting. Preferably made by artisans in smaller batches in real wood barrels, because that's the other thing to know, is there are ways of making vinegar that they can really speed up the process, and they can make it really quickly, because of course if you're making vinegar for mass distribution to supermarkets, you need to make it faster than it. Usually a good vinegar takes at least 6 months to make and age in a barrel. And of course, like I said, balsamic vinegar takes hella longer. It takes years and years and years. So, and the good stuff, the really great stuff, the stuff, like I said, that it comes in little bottles like this that are approved by the consortio, that sell for, I've seen them sell for 150, $175 for a little bottle like that, which sounds like a lot, except like I said before, you use it literally by the drop. So a little bottle like that lasts you a long time. Still, it's probably more expensive than most people are going to spend. But that stuff can age for 30, 40, 50 years. So this balsamico is probably, I would say, was aged for somewhere in the 4 to 5 years. It could be more. I'm not. I should ask Steve sometime how long this was aged, but it probably sat in an oak barrel for 4 or 5 years, maybe as many as 7. I don't know. But most vinegar, like this Lambrusco, this probably took about 6 months to produce in oak barrels, which is plenty of time to develop its flavor. Um, Vinegars like that are not necessarily going to be good for aging. You kind of want to make them and drink them. It's not something that you're going to let sit around. I mean, that being said, it's not going to go bad. It's if I could have this bottle for the next 10 years, and it may lose a little volume if it evaporates, but it's never going to go bad. As an employer of mine, as Giorgio De Luca said once, a woman complained that she thought that her vinegar had gone bad, and he just came by and he looked at her and he goes, "It's already bad." That's the whole point. It's wine that's gone bad. In fact, my theory is that vinegar was discovered about 2 weeks after wine was discovered, because that's about the time it would take for it to start turning into vinegar. So anyway, go to a good specialty store, which is another thing that Olive and I wanted to talk about today. We were going to talk about how fortunate we are to have the places we have to shop at. Olive's a big customer at Berkeley Bowl. I can hear you. I can hear you. That's Olive is talking in my ear, but I don't think our viewers can see or hear him. Maybe he doesn't really exist. Maybe I'm hallucinating. Yeah. We may have to change our software in the near future, but yeah. Anyway, Olive likes to go to Berkeley Bowl. I also like to go to Berkeley Bowl, but I don't go that often because I tend to walk to the market. So we walk to Monterey Market a lot, which is also really great. We go to Berkeley Natural a lot. I still go to Andronico's for things. I go there once in a while. They have some pretty good products. Um, I like to go down to Market Hall on 4th Street. I walk down there every so often. And then I tend to go to Berkeley Bowl West, and I go when I'm out and about. I'll go down there like once a month or something, and there's certain things I like to buy there. But these are the kind of places you can go to and find a really interesting selection of vinegars. You can find good olive oil there too. Um, but those are the kind of places you want to go to look for vinegar. And these vinegars, you can get good vinegar for not a lot of money. These Olive Oil Jones ones, I mean, this one, I forget what I paid for it, but it's probably about 40 bucks. But this is a full liter. Um, it goes a long way. I mean, a bottle like this will last me much longer than the same size bottle of olive oil. I go through olive oil much faster because you use more of it, and we use it for cooking, and we use it for salads, and we use it for dressing other kinds of foods. We use it to finish cooked food sometimes. We drizzle it in soups, we drizzle it on pasta. So we just go through a lot more olive oil. So a bottle like this, if you're just using it for salads, I mean, gosh, you're going to use a spoonful of this to dress a salad. So it goes a long way. So it's a pretty good value. And of course, in the store, you can find less expensive vinegars. There's a company here in the Bay Area called Kimberly Vinegars, and they make 5 or 6 different kinds of vinegar: red wine, white wine, champagne, couple of others. Really good product, really good product. They do everything that they make real traditional vinegars. Everything's in oak barrels. I've been to their manufacturing plant and visited them and toured there, and it's as artisanal as you can get, and yet they produce a good amount of vinegar, and the vinegars are delicious. There's also a lot of really good vinegars that are imported from France, because France makes great vinegar. Vinegar is a big part of the culture there. In fact, our word for vinegar, even though it's based in Latin, it actually came to us from French, vinaigre, which again means sour wine. What? Did I pronounce it wrong? Vinaigre. Vinaigre. It means sour wine, or actually means wine sour, and whatever. So anyway, my point is vinegar is a big part of French cuisine. And at Dean and DeLuca, we used to import. We had our own a special one that we imported. It was Paul Courcelet was the manufacturer, and it was part of the Dean and DeLuca selection. And oh my God, those vinegars were good. They were so good. And there's a bunch of other ones too. I think you have my there at the kitchen, don't you? Um, and I'm trying to think of some of the other not Dufour. I think there's a brand called Dufour's. Yeah, Edmund something. Anyway, there's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them from France. There's some good ones from Italy. There's a lot made here in the United States. And it's not hard to make your own vinegar. The trouble with making vinegar at home is that a lot of the wine you buy, because the thing you would do in Europe traditionally, what people would do in France is they would, when they had a bottle of wine, when there was wine left over, instead of trying to store it because it's going to go bad, they would just dump it in the vinegar jug, and they would just keep that going constantly, and you'd have mother in there, and this would just be a constant source of vinegar. But those wines tended to be very natural, without a lot of sulfites added, and a lot and that kind of thing. So sometimes there's too much preservatives in wine today that it kind of kills off the mother a little bit, so it doesn't make the greatest vinegar, but you can try it. I've certainly made vinegar. I've made a lot of vinegar, but it was more of a commercial operation that we were trying to do. Um, and it's not that hard, and it can be really good, although it's also really easy to buy your own vinegar. So get a selection, get as many as you can find, keep buying new ones. Like I said, they don't go bad. You can buy them and you can buy smaller bottles. I mean, I always buy these liter bottles from Olive Oil Jones because why not? Um, but they also sell they sell 3/4 liters and they sell half liters. So you can get smaller quantities. Um, and that's true with most of the vinegars you see in a store. You can get smaller bottles so you can try things out and see how you like them. But again, they don't go bad. So having a selection of vinegars is good. I think it's more important to have a big selection of vinegar than it is to have a big selection of olive oils. I think I have several olive oils and they're all delicious, but sometimes I have a hard time telling them apart. But vinegars are very distinct and they're really great. So there we go. I'm sorry that Olive is absent from this conversation, although I can hear him, but he is apparently not on the screen. So, um, what else did we want to talk about today? What are some other great stores? Oh, and the farmers market. I know there's people that sell olive oil at the farmers market, and I'm not sure if anybody's doing vinegar or not. Um, I think there used to be somebody that did vinegar I know there was somebody that did vinegar at the San Francisco farmers market, or one of them, the one um, down in the Embarcadero at the ferry building. There used to be a company from Anderson Valley that sold an apple cider vinegar, which was absolutely wonderful, really great stuff. We should have a whole show talking about apple cider vinegar because it's one of the miracle foods on earth. Um, it's incredibly healthy for you. Vinegars in general are very, very healthy for you, and they think that a number of years ago they discovered the acetobacters that make it all happen. They discovered them in outer space, and they think that it's one of the very most basic elements of life. So vinegar is really very special, and it's ancient. All the ancient cultures used vinegars. The ancient Greeks, the Romans. The Romans actually, olive oil was certainly used extensively, but vinegars were considered very special, and they would have bottles of vinegar or bowls of vinegar on the dinner table at these big banquets. Like today, everybody wants a plate of olive oil, dip their bread in, but in those days it was vinegar, and they would have these bowls full of really good vinegar, and people would dip their bread in it, and even meat and things they would dip in there and eat because they were so special and so healthful. So, um, but they're ancient. They go back, and in China too, in Asia, the vinegars go back. I mean, any culture that ever made any kind of fermented beverage, a fermented alcoholic beverage, ended up making vinegar because if it sits around long enough, it's going to turn to vinegar, whether you want it to or not. So, rice wines. Of course, in England, they make a lot of malt vinegar because it was more of a malt beer culture because of the climate. Um, France, of course, was mostly grape vinegar, but also apple vinegar. Of course, you go over to Normandy, which is famous for its apples, then you start getting more of that kind of fruit. And also they make a lot of eau de vie, and some of those make incredible vinegars. Germany is a great source for vinegar. I don't know how many of them are available here, except in maybe the most special shops. But there used to be a guy in Germany, and there was a guy in Austria that was making these incredible vinegars from all kinds of eau de vie and different wines and different fermented fruits, and he had them in these tall, slender bottles, and they were just magnificent. I wish I could tell you his name. I wish I could tell you where to get them. You probably can't. I think I've only had them in Europe at trade shows, but really good stuff. So vinegar, not only is it versatile, It can be used in so many things in the kitchen. It's also really, really healthy. A lot of people believe in having a spoonful of vinegar every day. I do. I think it's one of the best things you can do is just to have a spoonful of good vinegar. I would probably opt for this Lambrusco myself. Um, Really good for your overall health. And it's also a link to tradition. I mean, there's just so many cuisines that rely heavily on vinegars. So um, it's a link to that kind of to our past and to ancient cultures. So I'm a big believer in vinegar, and I hope you'll try them. I hope you'll seek out some vinegars and look for them. If you want to get some really incredible stuff, oliveoiljones.com. My old friend Steve Jenkins, it's his company. He was with Dean and DeLuca. He was with a number of other stores. He was a freelance consultant for many years. He's renowned as a cheese expert. Called he wrote a book called The Cheese Primer, Steve Jenkins Cheese Primer. It's not new, but it's still in print and it's still considered one of the best resources for cheese information. Anyway, he started this company, Olive Oil Jones, because he cared so much about good olive oil and he was so sick and tired of seeing bad olive oil on the shelves that he started importing it. And what he does is he brings it in bulk. He works with about, I don't know, 7 or 8 olive grower producers in Europe, a couple of them in Spain, I think 1 or 2 in France, and some in Italy, Sicily, and they grow and they harvest and they press all to his specifications. So he's very strict about how it gets done, and they do it. And then once they press the oil, they're put into these big, probably 1,000-liter containers, and they ship them over to Steve, and they're sealed, so they're airtight. Gets shipped over to him. They go to his warehouse, and then he's got this whole system that he doesn't bottle them until he gets an order. So if you order a bottle of olive oil from him, he puts it in the bottle, seals it, puts the label on it, packs it, ships it out the same day. It's literally the same day he gets the order, and it's the freshest oil you're ever going to have, probably, unless you go directly to an olive producer and get it out of the olive press. It's just fantastically fresh, and because they harvest to his specifications, it's all very they're very um, early harvest olives, so they're harvested when they're still green. And it's a big misconception when you let olives ripen fully to become black. They have a lot more oil in them, and so big producers like that because they get more bang for their buck. Also, you can let them ripen to the point where they literally just fall off the trees. Very easy to collect. The problem with that is it's not high quality olive oil. There aren't enough phenols in them to make it as good as it can be. When you get them green, you want that kind of bite in your throat when you use olive oil. You want that little pepperiness in the back of your throat. That's the good stuff. That means that it is full of antioxidants, full of all the good things that make olive oil so special and so healthy. Anyway, getting off the track, but that's what he does. And he packs it and ships it the day you order it, or the day he gets the order. And the same is true with his vinegars. Um, so all of this stuff is made in very special ways. He knows the people, he knows how they do it and what they do. So it's really good stuff. So if you want to check it out, go to oliveoiljones.com. And like I said, I buy everything in liters, but you don't have to buy that. You can buy small containers, see what you think, try them out. It's not cheap, but then, most of the really great things in life aren't. So, and at some point you just have to say to yourself, what's my health worth? Um, and bad olive oil is not good for you. cheap olive oil is made, and there's some very nefarious things that go on. And the more it oxidizes, and the more it those it loses its beneficial qualities. And the opposite of an antioxidant is a pro-oxidant, so it actually becomes sort of harmful. So it pays to go with something like this. Anyway, that's all the time we have, or I should say all the time I have, since this now seems to be my personal show. We'll be back next week. Hopefully Olive will have sorted out the technical problems, and he'll be back too. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.